Hi friends. Well, there is certainly power in consistency and model-driven apps are no exception, but have you ever needed to break that mold a little bit? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how you can use a custom page to replace a model-driven form. This video is kindly sponsored by Microsoft Canada. Well, in my previous videos, I've been showing the new commanding that allows you to customize the command bar inside model-driven apps. But of course, that's replacing the Ribbon Workbench that's been around for over 10 years now, which is being referred to as the classic commanding. And so this technique that I'm going to show you is going to use the Ribbon Workbench because you can't do that using the modern commanding. So it's a good demonstration of how we're in this middle ground between the old school way of doing things and the brave new world. But what are we going to do is move over into a model-driven app here. And this model-driven app is the same model-driven app I've shown in the past, a kind of classic purchase order line item, really simple, 2 custom tables. But what we can see here is we've got a purchase order record. And if I click on one of these records in this subgrid, you can see it opens up this very custom page here. And this is just a standard custom page. It's got like it's got a voice recorder on here, but it's showing you the data that came from that previous record. And we can use the back button to go back. Or you can also say, well, okay, if I want to create a new record, I can use that, and it will also use the custom page to create a new record. And I can also go into the homepage grid here with a list of all of those line item records and open up that custom page as well. So the custom page is kind of really performing exactly the same way as a standard model-driven form is. So I'm going to show you how you can do that now using the combination of JavaScript and using the Ribbon Workbench. So here is the custom page, and as you can see, it's using the Creator Kit, which I've done a lot of videos on, which is an awesome set of controls that makes your custom pages look very much like their native model-driven apps. And so we've got some elevation here, we've got the command bar across the top with all of the command bars you'd expect in a model-driven form. But of course, these are custom, and I've got the back button. If we look at the back button on change, it's using the back function, which navigates back to the previous model-driven form or grid, wherever this custom page has been opened from. And that's critical to the way that custom pages are integral to the way that model-driven apps work. But of course, the key here is that I can do anything. You know, it's a custom page. I can add in the ability to record audio or upload using the webcam or things like that. The sky is the limit. But we do have to be careful because we're now completely in a blank canvas. Although we're using the Creator Kit to help us, we still have to manage things like security and like each of these ribbon buttons across the top here. If I haven't got the permissions to create new records, I would need to disable that. If I haven't got permissions to delete records, I would have to disable that. So I'm going to have to do all of that stuff. And now a lot of that is handled for us by model-driven apps automatically, and we take it for granted. Also, things like reflow. I'm using this elevation here on this is a container, and you can see here on the left-hand side, we've got a set of containers, which was the root, and then we've got containers underneath that root, and that's all being responsive. And so if I was to make this smaller, this second area here would then wrap underneath that top section. And so all of that functionality, again, you get for free in a model-driven app that we have to implement inside our custom page. So all of this functionality, we need to make very sure that it really is going to be adding value to our app. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that our custom page is in our model-driven app. So here is my account management model-driven app. And so I'm going to edit that. And to add the custom page, I would click Add Page, and I'd select Custom Page and go Next, and then that would allow me to use an existing custom page. I don't want to show it in the navigation because this is only going to be used in place of this form. We don't want to just have it as in the navigation and allow us to show it out of context of any particular entity record. And so once I've done that, I can now access that custom page by navigating to it using the Mscrm API in JavaScript. So we do need to grab this unique ID for this custom page, so we can use that in our script later. And in fact, what I'm going to be showing you is actually described in the Microsoft Docs. And so I'll put the link down in the description of this video. And so you can see here it's overriding the default open behavior of a particular entity from a grid, and it gives you all of this information on how to do this and some JavaScript. But I'm going to show you how to do this using the Ribbon Workbench, and specifically to open up a custom page, because this article doesn't show you about opening a custom page. It just gives you custom behavior, and it's got Ribbon XML, all the kind of things that the Ribbon Workbench avoids you using. But one of the things about that article is it shows you how to just write plain JavaScript. Now, I'm a really big proponent of using TypeScript to write your JavaScript web resources rather than just plain JavaScript. So once you open the Ribbon Workbench, and there's lots of videos that you can follow, tutorials on opening the Ribbon Workbench. You can open it inside the XRM toolbox, or you can open the solution inside Power Apps. And you will need the latest version of the Ribbon Workbench. There were previous versions that you could only add this functionality to one of the subgrids, so the homepage grid or the subgrid, but the latest version allows you to do it in both places. And you'd have a solution that just contains the entity that you want to customize. So in my case, we're going to be loading the purchase order line item. Now, I've already made the functionality. I've already made the changes to purchase order line item. So I'm going to use invoice to demonstrate it. And the first thing to do is to go and add in a button. So you could add in a button to the homepage grid as well as the subgrid. And these are the two grids that you need to customize. Now, there is obviously the form subgrid as well, which there is the form command bar, which we don't need to customize. We just need the command bar on the homepage grid. So if we come over here, the homepage grid would be this area here. So when I double click on this row, it will then perform opening up the custom page, or indeed if I was in a parent record, there's the subgrid here, and I double click on that row, we need to customize that behavior to open up our custom page. And so the way that we do this is that we need to use this special name, this Mscrm.OpenRecordItem. And this is a special ID that's magic, and it tells the user interface to use this behavior to customize what happens when you open up a row in a subgrid. So I'm going to call this is the subgrid version. And we also want to do the same thing for the home grid as well, like that. So they do need to have two unique IDs. And we don't need to worry about any label because they're going to be invisible. But what we'll need to next do is go into this commands area here and go and add in a new command. And this command needs, again, this magic ID, this Mscrm.OpenRecordItem. And the first thing we want to do is go and create a enable rule, because we want to make sure that this is always going to be hidden. Because the way that buttons work in terms of hidden is that if the command has a enable rule, that means that it's going to be disabled, that means it's going to be hidden from the command bar. So I'll add in this value rule here and say hidden. So if the attribute hidden is present, it checks to see if it's got a value of hidden. And of course, that's always going to be false because there's no field called hidden, and its value is never going to be hidden anyway. So this is always going to equate to be false, and therefore it will always be invisible. So I can go into my command and check that we've got that enable rule set on that command. And now for each of these buttons, it's very important that we now wire up the button to that new command to define the behavior. So now what will happen is that when these buttons are invoked, this command will be invoked. But because the buttons are invisible, we're never going to actually press the buttons. It's just the fact that this command is sitting there in the background, ready for the user interface to use instead of the built-in behavior. So to define that built-in behavior, we add in an action, and I'm going to use this JavaScript action. And as I mentioned before, this behavior is going to be built using JavaScript because we can't do this using PowerFX yet, or in fact, we can't even create a button like this using the modern commanding. I suspect in the future there'll be some kind of way of doing this using the metadata, so we won't need to use commanding in this way, but this is the way we do it now. So I'm going to select the account management script. Inside VS Code, I have a project here, which is building some JavaScript using TypeScript. Now, I've got a free course that shows you how to manage all of this stuff here, because it could look a lot more complex. And indeed, if you go into the docs article about this functionality, if you come down here, you can see that they are writing this functionality just using JavaScript. So it does give you all of the options how you can do this. But using TypeScript means that it's a lot easier to maintain. You get a lot more IntelliSense. So I can do things with a lot less likelihood for there to be syntax errors and things like that. What we have is we've got this ribbon TypeScript file here, and we've also then got some configuration using Webpack on which tells VSCode how to build this TypeScript and compile it into a web resource, which is this JavaScript here. So this is the JavaScript which we'd actually upload into our web resource. And inside our solution, you would go and you'd use new, and you'd say more, and you'd click web resource, and that would allow you then to upload this file. So you would say it's a type of JavaScript, and then you'd upload that file that's just been generated from your TypeScript. I've already done that. You can see here it's called an account management script. And again, there are ways of automatically doing that, which I explain in that free course that I just talked about. But let's look at what's going on here. It revolves around this function here called OpenCustomPageInternal. And what this does is it accepts some parameter, which is the entity type name. So in our case, it's going to be invoice line item. And then it also defines a couple of configuration pieces of information. So we've got the custom page information. And if you remember that ID that we copied from the custom page, this is that ID there, which we'll need to put in. And that's going to be unique to the solution. So it won't change when we deploy it to a different environment. And we're also going to have this navigation option, which is going to define the type of custom page we're going to display, in the sense of it could be a pop-up dialog, or it could be inline or a sidebar. We're going to use it just replacing the current page because that's the default behavior in a model-driven app. There are also these other two parameters here, which of course are the important thing because they're going to define the type of record we're opening and also the ID of that record. So if I select a grid record, that will be the ID of that particular grid record. And then we use this navigation API. And this is using XRM navigation navigate to. And it accepts those two parameters that we've just defined. The great thing about using TypeScript is that we've got all of that, this IntelliSense, but we can also use some more advanced functionality, like we can use this await promise where I can use asynchronous code and I don't have to worry about using all of those constructs in just JavaScript, which you can see here, which is then and catch. This is the raw JavaScript that you would create, whereas the TypeScript makes it a lot easier to generate that functionality. So that's the function that actually performs opening up our custom page. But we need a function that's called from the command bar button, and that is this open custom page function. And so this accepts the most important part is this selected items array, which is going to be the item that's selected inside the grid. And it takes the first one of those because we're only going to open up a single record. And then it calls this open custom page internal functionality, passing that ID. Now, if we were opening this as a dialog, as I mentioned before, there are ways of doing that. Once that dialog is closed, you could actually refresh the grid that it came from, because we can accept the grid control that this function has been invoked from. And that's why this async functionality is really useful, because we're using async operator and the await operator here, so that we don't have to worry about promises and all that kind of raw JavaScript. This functionality is all being exported so that we're going to expose it in our JavaScript library. If we come into the Webpack config, we can see that the name of the web resource is webresource.js, which is that JavaScript file that we just saw. And it's going to be all compiled underneath this namespace, sample namespace. And that means that we will be able to access this function called OpenCustomPage using sample namespace.OpenCustomPage. But if you're looking at that and thinking that's really, really scary, just go to that Learn article that I put in the description, and you'll see that actually you could just do it using very, very simple JavaScript and upload it using a text editor. I don't recommend that for large projects, and that's why I use TypeScript, because it gets harder and harder to maintain over time. So in the JavaScript function name, we would put in sample namespace open custom page like that, so it knows which function to call. And we do need to add in some parameters here. So the first one be a Mscrm parameter, and it will be selected control selected item references. So that's that array of items that's selected, which only will contain a single one. And then the second one will be the control, which will be the grid that we're going to be able to refresh if we did open that dialog rather than just replacing the screen. So that will then mean that when we double click this record here, it opens our custom page like that. But of course, there are also other two places that we need to replace, because we've got this button here, which is new purchase order on the grid, but also on the main homepage grid as well. We've also got this new button across the top here, so we need to replace that. And the way that we do that is we need to first locate those two buttons, and we can customize the behavior. So if we come across the top here, we can select these two buttons. There's two new buttons. One is actually new record for BPF entity. We're not going to use that, which is the business process flow. We're going to customize this new record. You can see here that by the ID, we don't want to customize the button itself, like the icon and the display text. We only want to customize the actual behavior of this button. And what this does is it creates this copy of this new record from grid command down the bottom here. And what we'll do is we'll customize the behavior of this. So rather than calling this main system library and Mscrm core commands, which is the standard behavior, we're going to replace that with our own JavaScript like that. And we're going to use a similar function to open up a new record rather than opening up an existing record. So if we go over back to our page here, we've now got this other function here, which is called new record from grid. And this accepts selected entity, type name, and selected control to allow us to refresh it if we needed to. And this will actually call the same function. But the critical thing here is that we're passing in no ID, and that will define our custom page to show a new record rather than an existing record. So let's take a look at how that's actually working when we open up our custom record. Now, there is a on-start event inside custom pages and Canvas apps, but there is a discouragement from using those from that on-start now because it can create performance problems, and certainly it's going to be deprecated, I think. So instead, we're going to use the OnVisible event. So we look at the functionality in this OnVisible event. And what we've got here is something that's really quite straightforward. We're just simply looking to say if the record ID, which is the parameter that gets converted from that ID parameter that we're calling on the navigate function, it gets passed into our custom page as record ID. And if it is blank, we're going to set this form record variable to be the defaults for a purchase order line item. Otherwise, we're going to look up an existing record using that same record ID and convert it into a GUID. So it allows us to show a new record or an existing record. And that's why we're passing in this blank record ID when we're selecting this new button, because we don't want to load an existing record. So we've overridden that functionality for the home page new button, but we also need to do it on the subgrid as well. So if we look at this new button on the subgrid here, if you look at the customize command, it's grayed out, which is because it actually uses the same command as this other new button for that one. But there is actually another one here, this add new button, which we do need to customize and do exactly the same thing. So you can see it's now created this copy of the add new record from subgrid standard. So if we select that, you can see that it's again showing it's using the main system library as the default behavior. So we'll override that. We just need to replace that standard functionality with our own functionality similar to what we did before. And we've got a function here which is very similar. It's called add new record from subgrid standard. And it accepts quite a lot more parameters, but it just effectively just uses the same entity type name and passes in an empty string to open up that blank custom page. And so you can see all of these parameters inside this command that it's customized here. And we're just using this first one to use the type name. Lastly, you can see all these display rules down here and these enable rules. Well, now we don't need to customize all of this functionality. We only need to customize the commands, though we'll make these set to be uncustomized like that. So I just need to go down all of these items here. There we go. I've set them all to be uncustomized, but we do need to make sure that the custom one that we've created, this hidden enable rule, which we used to make sure that the button that we're overriding is hidden. We need to make sure that is not uncustomized because we need to define that behavior. And really, that's all there is to it. If we come over to the XML now, and if you refresh that, you'll now see some XML that looks very similar to the XML that we saw in that docs article. So that's it. And then we will just click publish. And then once published, that means that we can open up a record here. And if we go to parent record, we can open up records from the subgrid, but we can also click on new from the subgrid there, and that opens up an empty record. And we can also go to the subgrid here and click on new, and that opens up an empty record here. So there you have it. You're combining all of the power of custom pages and breaking that mold of model-driven forms where you need it. But remember, use with care. It's very easy to forget and take for granted all of the things that model-driven forms do for us just out of the box. But I've always been a real proponent for using both pro code and low code together. And this is a very good example. You've got custom pages with TypeScript and JavaScript. And I'm really excited to be teaming up with Microsoft Canada on their Developer Digital Meetup tour. And I'm going to be doing a session on using low code in the Power Platform to enhance and to complement more traditional software development techniques. And it's going to be on April the 25th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern time. You can register to attend it live in the link below, or you can catch it on demand afterwards. But I will be doing live Q&A there on the day, so I'd love to see you there. But is pro code the right word for it? Is code first the right word for it? I'm not really sure. Let me know in the comments. I think low code is the right word. It's very accepted, but we want to get a good word for the opposite of low code. I'd love to hear more from you. Anyway, until next time, cheers.